WordPress Accessibility Day 2023, Building an Accessible Theme for Accessible First Sites. Jen Harris, WordPress developer, and Fira LLC. Presentation recorded on September 28th, 2023.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. To those of you who are joining for the first time now, welcome. And for those of you who are coming back, welcome back to WordPress Accessibility Day 2023. My name is Jason Ferreira, and in my day job, I'm the accessibility lead for consumer products at Dow Jones. But for today, I will be your host. And thank you, everybody, for joining us for Building an Accessible Theme for Accessible First Sites with Jen Harris. Jen is the owner at Fira LLC, the developer of the Easy A11Y guide, and organizes the Baltimore WordPress meetup group. Prior to getting into WordPress development more than a decade ago, Jen was a developer for Boeing on the B-1 bomber and was a lecturer at Ohio State University's Computer Science Department. Jen has been featured in podcasts and won the 2022 Member of the Year Award in the #1 WordPress community. She is very active in WordPress groups, encouraging other developers and designers. She has been incorporating accessibility into websites for a couple of years and is a strong advocate of processes that either move accessibility earlier in a project or make accessibility easier to understand for novices. One last bit of housekeeping for attendees. Please feel free to add your questions in the Zoom Q&A section, and we'll answer them at the end of this session. Please use the chat to connect with other attendees, and that way the questions are a little bit, it's a little bit cleaner to find where the questions are. And with that, that's my bit done. So I will turn it over to you, Jen. All right. Without further ado.
Thank you, Jason. Share. All right, hopefully everyone can see my screen. Jason, can you just confirm?
I can see your screen.
Excellent. So today's talk is building an accessible theme for accessible first sites. So accessibility within your theme, what we're going to cover today. The earlier in the process that you solve for accessibility, the less expensive it is. When I've been doing builds for over a decade, the earlier we solve a problem, the less expensive it is. Spending an extra 20 minutes on something early in the design stage can end up saving us dozens of hours at the end of the build. So I really try and encourage things to get done earlier. And so when possible, if my theme can handle the accessibility for me, it is already solved and I don't have to worry about it at the end. So we're going to talk about what themes can do for accessibility and what they can't, what the accessibility ready tag covers, what it doesn't cover. We are going to do this while testing two themes side by side for accessibility. And then I'm going to discuss in some more detail some features within the Kaya theme and what I've done with it over the years. A little quick terminology. WCAG is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and these are maintained by the World Wide Web Consortium, or W3C. I will use WCAG many, many times in this presentation. Accessibility Ready. This is a specific tag used in the WordPress theme repository, and it basically means meets some guidelines. And we'll get into exactly which ones it does and does not meet. And then A11Y, which is an abbreviation for accessibility. If I remember correctly, it came out of Twitter where they were trying to squeeze everything into 150 characters. And so a lot of words were getting abbreviated. It removes 11 characters between A and Y. And I also love it because it's frequently pronounced ally or ally, which means a friend of or an associate of. And I like to try and be a friend to people with various disabilities. Slides and links are available, and I will have this link on like the first 7 or 8 slides. What theme accessibility is and is not. So your theme is basically your foundation. And you can either start out with a good foundation, or you can end up fighting yourself and having all these different barriers to deal with over time. And I would prefer to start with a nice, good foundation. But theme accessibility is not actually comprehensive. It can't do absolutely everything for you. A lot of accessibility is in how you add your content, and of course, in the various plugins and additional functionality you add to a website. So, an important thing to remember when talking about plugins and page builders and even Gutenberg itself is that many of these have accessibility issues, and it's important to check into what you are using before you actually use it. And of course, test. And we're going to do a ton of hands-on testing in this, so it's hopefully going to be really helpful in getting you going on testing your own stuff. We are going to be comparing two themes side by side. The first one is the Kaya theme, which is mine, and it's been designed with accessibility in mind. The second one is the Divi theme. Now, I was specifically looking for a theme that I knew had a number of failures, and so I know that Divi does. And they also purport to be the most popular WordPress theme. And as we all know, just because something's popular doesn't mean it's good. For this, we will be using the official test data from the theme unit test. So one of the things that I like about spinning up test sites when comparing different themes is that I get a much better comparison of apples to apples. If I try and actually look at some of their example demos, things are just so customized and so different between the demos. I can't really get a good comparison and see what is being done by the theme versus what is being done by the content and the choices that have been made. So the accessibility ready tag. This is the tag in the WordPress repository, and it means it covers some content. So we are going to go off to the actual WordPress repository information, and we're going to look at the required tag, and we're actually going to go through and explain what this required tag is, what it means within your theme, why some of these things even exist. So the first one is keyboard navigation. Can someone who doesn't use a mouse navigate your website? Well, as I look at my desk, I don't even have a mouse. I don't use one. It actually bothers my hand to use a mouse. So I actually sit here with this pen on a big Wacom tablet. So I already get some benefits, and I do actually use a little bit of screen navigation sometimes. One of the first things I'll actually check before I even get into keyboard nav is I will do a quick lighthouse test. So here we have the Kaya demo website, and I have imported the demo content. I have configured just a couple of widgets. So I've configured some footer widgets. Just a couple of things are configured, very, very little. And I have done the exact same on the Divi install. Again, I've configured some widgets, but otherwise I have not configured options. So here we can see out of the box, the Divi has a 79. Now, Lighthouse has a more limited set of tests than some of the other tools such as Axe or Wave. So the fact that they're already scoring 79 as a lot of things have not passed. So here we can see this includes a form. This is the search form, and we can see that it's missing labels. Links don't have a discernible name, not a great thing. The user scalable has been set to no, which means that there is a limit to how much this website can be zoomed. This is a problem for people with poor vision, as some of them do a ton of zooming. I know people who literally zoom to over 1,000%. Now, contrast issues are not typically a huge issue in themes, as many themes allow you to actually set your own color palettes. But for the accessibility ready tag, it does require that all of the contrast by default meet the 4.5 to 1. And of course, this is an issue with heading elements are in non-sequential order. That means that by default, this theme has done specific coding to typically make elements such as the sidebar out of order on headings. That is really not a great start because that typically requires a lot of code to overwrite that. As you can see, Kaya did fine. So now we're going to take it over to Axe. And in the Axe, I'm just going to scan all of my page. And it says no automatic issues. So basically that means that of their tests, there were no problems. Now these tests are not all encompassing, but they're a pretty good foundation. And we'll run the same here. We had 30 automatic issues. And one of the things I like about Axe is that it does categorize issues: critical, serious, moderate, and minor. Well, critical is not great. Form elements are missing labels. Again, here, this is an intentional decision by Divi to explicitly hide from everyone the label on the search field. Zooming and scaling aren't to be disabled. Again, they intentionally disable the ability to zoom beyond a certain threshold. The color contrast, I'm not too worried about. The links is an issue. The ID value is not always an issue. That's why it's categorized here in Axe as minor. So we will now get on to the keyboard test. Keyboard test, put your cursor in the URL bar, and then on your keyboard, hit Tab. And absolutely nothing happened. This is not a good start. I'm repeatedly hitting Tab and absolutely nothing is happening. So X took preference. Nothing's happening. So basically, someone using a keyboard cannot navigate this site whatsoever because I can't see anything. So that is not good. Here, I immediately get a skip to content link. That is great. That means that if I want to skip over the menu bar and go straight into the content, I can. But I'm going to go through. Here we have a double outline on the focus state, which means that we have a dark gray background and it has both a blue and a white outline. So we can clearly see that white outline. The search gets highlighted. The search is highlighted with a blue border. The button gets a blue and white outline. As we move through the menu, these are clearly getting focused. We can make it through all of the menus. Now, would it be slightly more ideal if we could use arrow keys to manage some of those menus and get out of some of those deeper menus? Yes. I generally recommend using the Max Mega Menu plugin, as that is done pretty good job of improving menus. So let's take a look at the next item. Controls. So basically this means that elements that are a button and elements that are input and elements that are an anchor must behave as they're supposed to. Essentially, this means divs and spans are not buttons, and they shouldn't be used by the theme as them. Most themes don't actually create too many issues. The biggest one would be typically menu toggles. Now, as we have seen, this Divi theme is already creating a lot of problems. So it's going to be very hard to even test whether or not it has any issues with the keyboard. Next, we have skip links. And who do the skip links benefit? The skip link is that very first link that I showed you here at the top, and it says skip to content. This allows people using a keyboard to skip your entire header area and main menu and go straight to your main content. This is a really, really handy thing for people who use keyboards. Obviously, the Divi theme did not have that. Forms. For these form guidelines, it basically is looking for a label element must be visible. Here we can see that on the Divi theme, there is a label element that is included by WordPress core. However, they have chosen to put a display none, which hides this label from everyone. Here you can see on the Kaya theme that the label is right there. Headings, using correct heading order. So in this case, we'll take a look at these headings down here in the footer. And what you'll see is that this heading is an H3, and there is a screen reader heading that is an H2. So we have here on the page your H1, then we have the screen reader level for a footer. What a lot of people with screen readers do is they can actually navigate the website by getting a list of all the headings. So putting this footer heading here as a screen reader heading allows them to immediately jump straight to the footer. And then within the footer, you want things labeled as an H3 and appropriate. Here on Divi, we can take a look and it has labeled, we have these H3s, but there's no H2s. Now, these headings are sometimes settable depending on what type of heading they are. So for example, here, the short nav menu, this would be actually coded by the theme. So it's jumping straight to an H4. So that is not good. So we've seen the headings. ARIA landmark roles. Basically, it means use the appropriate types of elements for the appropriate stuff. So role equals search form. This content is actually added by WordPress core. And this is not actually adding a role. But again, that is part of WordPress core, and that is not really the responsibility of the theme. Most themes don't actually add their own forms. Navigation menu should have a nav tag. So we'll take a look here. We have a UL, and it does include a nav tag. It is showing header tags. The main body will typically use a main tag. And if it does not use a main tag, it should use a role equals main. And here we can see that Divi is doing neither of those. So here we can take a look and we have main. So that is the main content. We have the header. We have the footer. So those are showing up well. And again, this is specifically for things that are done by the theme. So if it's one of the WordPress blocks, that's not the theme's fault. Content links. So links within the content should be underlined. This particular page does not have any links. Here you can see on the sidebar that we have lots of links and those are all underlined. That's basically telling us that things are underlined by default. Here we are, we see our links and our content. And example page isn't showing in this. There we go. So here we can see that these are not underlined. So that is an automatic failure of this criteria. Repetitive link text. This is typically done on a blog page. So sometimes on blog pages, you will see the read more or continue reading types of links. This page is not using any of those, so doesn't really apply. But if you were using them, then you would need to show that the links were unique. So here we have read more. And you can see that in the read more, we have screen reader text, which tells you what article you are reading more of. So that allows for link differentiation and meets the repetitive link issue. And here you can even see in their example with the repetitive link how they've used screen reader text. Contrast. This is basically means that the default theme colors need to pass contrast. As we saw from the automated checker, they passed fine and they failed in Divi. Images. When the theme is inserting images, it should allow for alt text. So let's take a look at an image that is typically inserted by the theme, and that would be the hero image or the logo for the site. We have an image and we can see that it does in fact have alt text. We'll take a look at Divi. And well, I happened to put some bad alt text in because I had originally started this with Hello Elementor. And then I rapidly discovered that the Hello Elementor theme had no widgets, no settings, and was really not a great test theme. So that is on me for not having corrected the image alt text there. Next is media. So media resources that are done by the theme should not auto start. Basically, this is if your theme includes something special like a slider. Neither of these themes in the absolute default configuration include that. Screen reader text. So it is great to include the official WordPress screen reader text class. As we've already seen, the Kaya theme includes it. I'm honestly not sure whether or not Divi includes it or not. Wow, Divi doesn't even mark this up into a paragraph or even a div. This has no content. Okay. Well, I'm just going to make this a paragraph. And then at the end, I am going to add some screen reader text and see if it actually does. So again, I just modified this text underneath Hello World. And we are seeing that it does, in fact, hide the screen reader and does support that class. So that's nice. Finally, under the required are things that are not permitted. And this typically you need to do using a code search in the actual theme code. And that is a positive tab index attribute, inclusion of the access key attribute, and checking the content for underscore blank. Now, I have not actually done that in the code hunt, but one thing I can normally check is the social media icons. This is the most common place for this to occur in a theme. And here I can see that the link is not using target blank, so it's not spawning anything on its own. So most likely it is doing okay. The other place to check is the designer links, and those are also not using target blank. So that's fine. Here I can do the exact same tests. And again, we can see that there's no target blank. So we're set. So that handles the accessibility ready tag. Now let's talk about things that this tag does not cover. First of all, it doesn't cover anything outside the official WordPress repository. And there are lots of themes that are not in the repository for many different reasons. Some of them are paid themes, and paid themes can't be in the repository. Some are just the theme author didn't feel like going through all the effort and rigmarole to get it into the repository. And other times, theme authors disagree with some of the specific requirements of the repository. For example, shortcodes are not allowed in any themes in the repository. This isn't because shortcodes are evil. This is a choice that the repository team has made. The actual theme review process can easily take over a month for themes trying to get into the repository. And there is a very small group of people who are actually qualified to test the accessibility ready tag. So having that tag on a theme can mean it takes significantly longer, possibly even 6 months or more, to get that theme reviewed. So for this reason, many themes have not chosen to go after the accessibility ready tag, even though they have plenty of accessibility in them. So just because something doesn't have the tag or it's not in the repository shouldn't disqualify you from using it. Here we're going to talk about some of the things that the accessibility ready tag doesn't cover, but could be of an issue in a theme. First one is use of color. Now, it's not super common, but I have seen some themes that include as a theme element a pricing table with yes and no. So in that pricing table, if you were to have a green square for yes and a red square for no, that would be a failure. If you were to use a green checkbox for yes and a red X for no, that would pass because it's not only color. Page titles aren't checked by this. Basically, pages should have useful titles. This is typically just the name of the page here in the title bar. And as you can see, both of these themes do have page titles included. Language of page. Language of page does need to be included, and that is absolutely a theme item. That comes here in the HTML tag, ENUS. And again here, ENUS. So those are showing that both of those have the language. Focus, no change. When something received focus, it should not create a change of context. Now, this I have seen on a couple of sites where when I focus on something on the left, something over on the right changes. For example, a vertical carousel of options where it highlights that this theme is responsive, this theme has color choices. And then on the right side, it changes a whole bunch of content. Well, that's not good because that content may not be visible to the user, especially someone using a screen magnifier. They have no idea that a whole bunch of other content is changing just because they switched what item was in focus. On inputs, things shouldn't suddenly do more changes. Resizing of text. Resizing of text is a really easy one to check. So I'm actually going to do this in a separate browser window just because that's where my browser is going to open my settings. So in your browser, you go to font size. And in the font size, it currently says medium. And if I switch to very large, the website should change. It should respect my font sizes. There are a lot of other tools which allow you to change the font size, but this is one of the easiest ways to quickly test it. So here we are on the Divi site, and I'm going to do the same thing. I am switching to very large, and absolutely nothing happened. And I have switched back to medium, and still nothing has happened. So that's showing that this does not respect people's font preferences. Responsive. Website needs to be responsive. Sadly, in this day and age, we still have to say this. So all we do to check that is we just use the options here. I'm just testing it on an iPhone. It works fine. Going to test it here. Again, it's fine. Both of those passed. Non-text contrast, clearly identifying user interface components. Here's an example of a user interface component. This is the search area. And on this theme, it has a very light border that can be almost impossible for people with certain vision issues to even see. Over here on Kaya, we have the same search bar, and it has a nice dark border, which is clear and meets the contrast requirements of WCAG. Text spacing. Text spacing can be overridden to improve reading experience. This one's a little trickier to test in the browser, but not too hard. I can come here and put in some letter spacing of 0.2 EM, and that worked fine. And I can also update my line height to 1.5, and that worked fine. I'll do the same thing over here. I will just pop in letter spacing and line height. I happen to know that the line height is already 1.5, so I'm just going to change it to 1.7 so that you can actually see the visual difference. Worked fine for both of those. Next is headings. Headings and labels should describe topic or purpose. This is not huge on themes, but it does come up, especially if the theme has included any widgets. So some themes do actually include Gutenberg blocks, they include widgets. Those widgets should have a useful heading. So for example, the Kaya theme includes this widget and it says follow us. And then here in the information, if I inspect it, it says visit us on Facebook. So that says follow us, visit us on Facebook. That's clearly indicating that we're talking about social media. And this is a very common heading used for social media. Consistent use of buttons and icons. This basically means if something does the same thing as something else, it should have a matching label. If two things do radically different things, they should have different labels. So for example, if you had multiple menu areas. So here we have a blog page, and up top we have a blog page, and those are consistently labeled because they go to the same locations. So WCAG 2.2 level AA is coming out very, very soon. It is expected to be out before the end of 2023, and it is basically finalized. They may make some very, very minor notes about it, but it's pretty much final. So one of these is that focus is not obscured. So what that means is when someone is focusing on something, that focus is not obscured. So if a theme had a floating icon, for example, and that floating icon completely covered something up, then that would obscure the element and it would fail this criteria. The element can be partially obscured in level AA. It can't be obscured in AAA. The minimum size for clickable elements is now 24 by 24. Now this is a great size. One of the things is if you look at a typical paragraph element, I will default my elements to, I'm actually going to grab a smaller element. Here we are. So here is my element. It is a link. And we can see that the line height is 1.5 times the font size 16, which is 24 pixels. So that means that the height of my element is basically automatically hitting at 24 pixels. And as long as I have more than one character in it, and links should have more than one character in them to be a useful link, then it's going to meet that automatically. If we take a look over here at the Divi theme, we will take a look at the font size, which is set to only 14 pixels, but the line height is set a little smaller, and you'll see that the actual rendered element is only 19 pixels tall. So it is going to be failing that new criteria. If the theme provides inputs or overrides existing inputs, allow copy and paste. So this is actually on authentication, and some themes will override the login page for WordPress, or some themes may include something like a membership system, in which case those themes need to allow for copy and paste into the input fields so that people don't have to attempt to type long, complex passwords, because that's not fun. Some more things that are kind of outside of the WCAG requirements that are missed. Check the JavaScript console for errors. Here we just go to the console and we see if there are any errors, which there are not. Great. We'll come over here to Divi. This is just a notification. This is not an error. Errors are displayed with an error symbol and in red on the JavaScript console. Now, depending on what browser you are using, you may be encountering some additional errors if your browser is blocking certain resources from being loaded. Those are not counted against the theme. That is a choice of your browser. I use the Brave browser, so I block a lot of things. The next one is easy child themes. I have yet to meet a client who doesn't want to customize something and then customize it a whole lot more. So a great way to do customizations is via child themes. So it's important that your theme have easy child themes. Now, the Divi theme does provide a child theme for you that you just have to drop in and then modify. And the Kaya theme is set up to very easily allow for child themes. Literally, you just put a style.css in there and you're good to go. You don't need to include anything special to get the child theme CSS to start running. Some additional items. Ensure that jump links actually jump. So I grabbed a different website here, and this has a link which is called Talk to Us Today. And this link uses a smooth scroll to jump down the page to this form. Well, I just clicked a link, so logically my focus should have jumped to this section. However, if I go to fill out the form by using my keyboard and I hit tab, I jump back up the page because it didn't move my focus down the page, which is really, really annoying for people who use keyboard navigation or who like to use keyboards to fill out forms, which a lot of people do. Checking for inverted colors. I have had a few situations where working with a website and inverted colors, suddenly buttons went from readable to completely unreadable. There ended up being some strange CSS going on, and the website just didn't work in inverted colors. Now, I don't honestly know if changing my computer to inverted colors will actually show for you or not. In one sec. In my computer's system preferences under accessibility, there is a display section and it allows me to invert colors. I use a Mac. There are also color invert possibilities for PCs. Please check with Microsoft for directions on that. I am going to set invert colors on my computer. I don't honestly know if that is going to display over Zoom or not. If Joe or Jason could let me know whether that is displaying or not as invert.
It is not.
Okay. I didn't think it would over Zoom. Anyway, check your computer settings to invert your colors and test with those. Also, make sure that no all caps is keyed in. So I don't see any of that on either of these themes, which is the content that is specifically keyed in by the theme. I have seen it happen. I have seen sometimes where the theme actually had some demo content, had some default widgets where it was all caps as the heading. And that was not desirable because all caps should only be used for acronyms. The next one is misuse of ARIA. So ARIA can be kind of confusing and kind of complex. So the best thing to do if you don't know whether or not to use ARIA is don't. No ARIA is better than poorly done ARIA, because that can end up creating a nightmare for screen reader users. And most of the time with theme content, you shouldn't be using ARIA except for if you're doing some customization of the nav menu, in which case make sure you know what you're doing. Some red flag items to watch for in themes. Don't disable right-click or browser extensions. So as you've noticed, I have used right-click a whole lot. And a lot of people actually use right-click to access some of their accessibility tools. For example, something like speech. You can have your browser speak text to you. This can be used by a number of people with dyslexia or Erland syndrome, or just who have tired eyes. And they can just have the computer read out paragraphs of text to them so they don't have to actually read them. This is also really great for people who are trying to learn a second language. They can have the computer read out the text to them so they hear it as well as see it, and that helps with learning pronunciation. Leave your scroll bar and other browser elements alone. So the website that does this the most, one of these pages has it. Of course, I can't remember which page it was. Here it is. This page on PatchStack has this super narrow bar on the right-hand side. So one, it is extremely difficult to see. And two, it is impossible to grab. You cannot grab this with a mouse. And as you have probably noticed, I do a lot of grabbing. So I really happen to hate that. So basically, leave the browser elements alone. People are used to them. People like them. They do not like it when someone walks over to their desk and basically rearranges everything on them. And that's what changing your browser is essentially doing to people. Avoid using any preloaders. There's a bunch of themes which come with those splash display screens before they load. They're really annoying and can cause a lot of issues for people with vestibular disorders or people who just have a headache. Don't animate things. This is an example of a website that animates something. When I hover my mouse, the link bounces. Now, this is not good for people who have motion issues, and it's also just not good for readability. At the bottom of the screen, it does something even worse. It literally shakes the link so you can't read it easily. Don't follow the mouse around. I've seen a few different websites where when I drag my mouse, and I tend to mouse all over the place, when I drag my mouse, they have an effect of stars following me. That is so incredibly annoying. Please leave my computer elements alone. Avoid using infinite scroll. A lot of people use the footer to access quick links or things within a website. When you have infinite scroll, there is no website footer. You can't reach it. Infinite scroll can also be a problem for a lot of people trying to use screen readers and keyboard navigation. Avoid smooth scroll and hyper scroll. As I showed previously with the focus not moving, when you use smooth scroll, you usually screw up the focus. And I mean at least 9 times out of 10, when a JavaScript implementer does smooth scroll, they screw up the focus. Also avoid using hyperscroll. For example, here, I grab my scroll bar and I scroll down. This is the expected behavior. When I come over here on this Divi page, I grab my scroll bar and I scroll down, and it's actually moving at a slightly different rate. And also Divi includes a setting to totally screw up the rate of a scroll bar. Drives me nuts, and many other people. Now, I always get asked, what about theme builders? In general, theme builders are not tested for accessibility, and they are pushed for fancy, fancy, fancy features. And those features almost always create accessibility barriers. Many of those are unusable menus, problems with the search options. Some of them create completely inaccessible sections where you can't even get to the content. They will frequently create jump links that don't move their context. They frequently get the heading orders all wrong. And a lot of them will actually inject lots of inline styling. And inline styling is really not your friend, especially if you have to maintain this website in the future. Inline styling is one of the biggest headaches for trying to update a website to a new look.
Hey, Jen, I'm gonna pause you right there just for considerations of time. We have 3 minutes left. So if you could just wrap up, and then we can finish up the session on time.
Yep.
Thank you.
So quickly about my theme, then I started building this for rapid development from Photoshop to WordPress. And I got tired of fighting other themes, so I just developed my own solution. I started adding a lot of accessibility to Kaya in October of 2021. I did a major push, encouraging the accessibility statements, using font sizing and rems so that it can easily be updated and controlled by the user, adding in focus states, removed redundant aria, and a number of other options. Also added screen reader text, underlined links in the body, and people can get the slides later. Important thing I want to talk about quickly is classes. When you use classes on your elements, it makes it very future friendly. For example, adding screen reader text, white text, large text. This allows you to later update that large text globally by just changing a CSS and not having to go into each and every page and make updates. And also adding a lot of things like margins and paddings, and having these as quickly accessible CSS classes so that you can make really easy tweaks when you're building out pages. And I was going to do a demo, but really don't have time for that. All right, Jason, I have wrapped.
Okay, thank you very much, Jen. That was really great. For those of you in attendance, I see a bunch of questions came in. I know we're not going to have time to get to those questions, but Jen will be sending the questions off to you, so you will have them, and you can always reach out to the individuals who ask those questions.
All right.
Okay. Well, thank you all for attending today's session with Jen Harries. I think I got that right. And you can continue the conversation in the chat or on social media using the hashtags WPA11YDay and hashtag WPAD2023. We'd also appreciate it if you go to 2023.wpaccessibility.day/feedback to provide anonymous feedback for our speakers on their presentation. And while you're there, you can enter to win a t-shirt. And please stay tuned for understanding color and contrast requirements in WCAG 2 coming up at the top of the hour at 2 p.m. UTC. And while you're waiting, please don't forget to visit our sponsors pages to grab virtual swag and enter for a chance to win some great prizes. I will see you right here at the top of the hour after the break. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you to WordPress Accessibility Day 2023 sponsors. Platinum sponsor, Equalize Digital. Equalize Digital's Accessibility Checker plugin is an automated accessibility scanning tool that helps WordPress websites become and stay accessible. Platinum sponsor, Gravity Forms. Gravity Forms is the professional form builder that you need to create beautiful, powerful, and accessible forms. Gold sponsors, 20i, DQ, Empire Caption Solutions, Pressable, and WP Engine. Silver sponsors, Code Geek, Drake Cooper, GoDaddy, Lone Rock Point, NerdPress, Overnight Website by Kinetic Iris, Riola Networks, A11Y Collective, and The Blogsmith. Bronze sponsors, Accessicart, Green Geeks Web Hosting, Hall Analysis SEO Consulting, HDC, ITX, IvyCat, Metabox, Pixel Chefs, Simply Schedule Appointments, SiteGround, Termageddon, Underrepresented in Tech, Weglot, and Yoast.